On this episode of China Uncensored, Apple, the company known for giving users loads of choices and freedoms to use their products however they want, just broke my irony meter. Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. Boy, folks, what a month it's been. China Uncensored launched a brand new website, thanks in part to the YouTube adpocalypse. And we launched on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and last but definitely not least, Apple TV. It was a shock when we received a notice from Apple saying they removed the China Uncensored app from Hong Kong and Taiwan, apparently because the show is illegal there? Strange that I don't remember narrowly escaping prison when we went to Hong Kong and Taiwan last year and met with multiple government officials. I wrote to Apple CEO Tim Cook at the beginning of the month asking for an explanation and a demand to put China Uncensored on the app stores there. And we started a petition, which I'm sure everyone watching has signed because you're all good people. Tim Cook has not yet responded to my letter, and I couldn't figure out why. But now, I think I've got my answer. He's been too busy winning the Free Speech Award from the museum in Washington, D.C. The museum, besides being the all-time winner of the punniest museum name, also promotes, explains, and defends free expression and the 5 freedoms of the First Amendment. Which sounds great. And they have some pretty cool exhibits, like an entire section of the Berlin Wall with an East German guard tower, and a memorial dedicated to journalists who have died reporting the news, and a permanent exhibit on the first dogs. Okay. Back to the Free Expression Awards. The awards honor people who have taken personal or professional risks in sharing critical information with the public, have been censored or punished by authorities or other groups for their work, or have pushed boundaries in artistic and media expression. That's why Playboy founder Hugh Hefner also won a Free Expression Award. I'm sure he got it just for the articles. Tim Cook gave the longest victory speech of the night. According to Apple Insider, he spoke of the importance of freedom of speech, not just the forms of speech that entertain us, but the ones that challenge us, the ones that unnerve and even displease us. Wise words, Mr. Cook. I totally agree. In praise of Tim Cook, Museum made this video.
We believe that a company that has values can really change the world.
I think it's really important that corporate leaders like Tim care about principles like freedom of expression and the advancement of human rights.
He takes risk at both a personal and a professional level to engage in new ideas.
It's not just about making money, it's also about making a difference in the world.
Yes, Apple, making a difference in the world by doing things like being the platinum sponsor of the 2017 Free Expression Awards. I'm sure Tim Cook winning one of those very same awards was a complete coincidence. It's just like the time I won the Best Host of a China-Focused Comedy News Show Not Based in China award, right after I gave the hosting organization $2 million. But let's talk about what Apple is doing in China. You see, while Tim Cook was being honored for his commitment to free speech, Apple has been doing everything it can to help the Chinese Communist Party censor. For example, when the Chinese government asked Apple to remove the New York Times from the App Store in China, along with a bunch of other independent Chinese media, and an app that lets Chinese internet users break through the Chinese Communist Party's draconian internet censorship firewall, plus of course China Uncensored, they did. Because as Apple said, the content was illegal in China. Sure, last year Apple told the FBI they wouldn't help in a terrorism investigation for privacy and security reasons, but that was the FBI. The worst Apple could have faced was probably a big fine. But the Chinese Communist Party could literally bring down all of Apple's operations in China tomorrow for any reason at all, even when they bend over backwards to kowtow to the party, which just shows that they don't know anything about kowtowing. It's just like how one day the Chinese government offices decided to ban Windows 8 and replace it with a Chinese knockoff. and there was nothing Microsoft could do about it. The Chinese Communist Party's arbitrary, highly politicized control of the government and the judicial system strikes fear into the hearts of every company operating in China. So I understand why Apple is concerned. They don't just make iPhones in China. China is also the world's biggest consumer of iPhones. I mean, the Communist Party could just ban the sale of iPhones tomorrow in the entire country. I know that sounds crazy, but it briefly happened in Beijing last year. So Apple is facing a real threat to its bottom line in China. But at least by being so morally flexible and doing what the Chinese government tells them, Apple has had smooth sailing in China. Just kidding. At every step of the way, the Chinese regime has still made things as difficult as possible. In 2012, Apple had to pay $60 million to a Chinese company to get the rights to the name iPad in China, because Chinese courts wouldn't grant Apple the trademark. In 2013, CEO Tim Cook was forced to issue a humiliating public apology to Chinese consumers after Chinese state-run media launched a largely false campaign to smear Apple's customer service reputation. Then in 2016, Chinese authorities shut down the iBooks store and iTunes Movies just a few months after Apple launched them in China. And just this month, Chinese authorities summoned Apple to court over its App Store. So I guess Apple has learned a lesson from being the victim of arbitrary, unfair actions by the Chinese Communist Party. And that lesson is, that's how Apple ought to treat everyone else. So I'm not super surprised that Apple TV banned China Uncensored in China, though I am surprised they banned our app in Hong Kong and Taiwan. Unless that's just some more of that backwards kowtowing to the One China policy. But you know what? I say if Tim Cook is willing to accept the museum's free speech award, he should accept the responsibility it implies. Mr. Cook, put your money where your mouth is and make Apple stop removing media apps from your app stores in Hong Kong and Taiwan, as well as in mainland China. Because remember,
It's not just about making money, it's also about making a difference in the world.
so what do you think Apple should do to make a difference in the world? Leave your comments below. And to further encourage Tim Cook and Apple to make the right decision, click the link below to sign our petition to get the China Uncensored app back in the Hong Kong and Taiwan app stores. Thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored. Once again, I'm your host, Chris Chappell. See you next time.